This is a story about mice, the smell of cherry blossom, and inherited trauma. So they've done an experiment where they gave mice the smell of cherry blossom and a small electric shock, and very quickly the mice learned to fear the smell of cherry blossom even when the electric shock was not applied. That much seems obvious, but what was surprising was their offspring, they weren't exposed to cherry blossom or to electric shocks, and then their grand offspring, the grand mice children, they were exposed to the smell of cherry blossom and were afraid of it, despite having never been exposed to an electric shock and never even met another mouse that had been. Now this raised an interesting question about inheriting trauma and fears, and closer studies showed that those initial mice who were exposed to the shock actually changed their DNA, even changed their sperm, so they could pass on genetics that had inherent fear of cherry blossom. Now this is surprising and also has huge implications about inherited trauma and fear and stress. Now the implications for human might be extrapolated at this point from one small experiment on mice, but equally the implications must be clear. I can pass my trauma onto my children genetically and hardwire them. Or maybe you're thinking, oh crap, there's nothing I can do now because my grandfather went through World War II. I'm now genetically wired to be afraid. If that's what you're thinking, the good news is they then retrained the grandparent mice to be unafraid of cherry blossoms, and their DNA reverted back to type, and the next line of mice didn't get that inherited trauma. So what does that mean for you? Well, maybe it means having the kick up the bum that you need to start going to see a psychologist, working on yourself, or maybe preemptively seeing a psychologist so you can address any inherited trauma that you got from your ancestors. For me, it means three things. Continuing to learn to sit with discomfort, so I'm not stressed about being stressed. About focusing on what I can control and letting go of the rest. And above all, reframing obstacles as challenges, so I get excited about taking them on, rather than overwhelmed and stressed and afraid whenever I face them. Having said that, I was pretty scared when I was woken up by a polar bear outside of my tent. But I don't think passing on a fear of polar bears to my children is a bad thing.
If you want to become hardier, happier, and more fulfilled by learning about resilience, then subscribe by the button above.